experts like Dr. Max Herman say that the United States is on the cusp of a new cycle of civil unrest. Economist Martin Armstrong predicts that a, quote, serious political uprising will erupt by 2016 in the United States. I wouldn't go that far, but it's virtually guaranteed that we will see more widespread domestic disorder over the next 2 years if we continue to follow these disastrous Keynesian economic policies and allow populist social justice movements to be hijacked and subverted by the powers that be. The elite are busy making preparations for the outcome of this next phase of the crisis. The question is, are you?
We all the time hear about police shootings, police brutality, things of that nature. And something that sometimes flies under the radar is when these things happen to animals. You know, I myself, just living here in the city of Austin, have had a chance to cover this, or should I say the unfortunate task of covering these things, because what happens is you have let's say a mail carrier or a pizza man or somebody else who may encounter a dog, and they don't pull out a gun and shoot them. They pull out a can of pepper spray, or maybe they have some type of stick and they wave at the dog. But sometimes these officers just don't know how to behave themselves, and here's proof positive of that.
We got to think about life, death, family, that fast.
I fired one shot into the dog's head. Drug dealers have aggressive dogs.
Have you ever seen a drug dealer using a Labrador dog?
No.
The police officer had shot and killed their dog, and that dog was a Chihuahua.
And for more on this, we go to Michael Ozias, the maker of the film Of Dogs and Men. All right, thank you for joining us today, Michael.
Thank you for having me, Jakari.
So we just played the trailer of your piece. So tell us what inspired you to make this in the first place.
The initial inspiration for me came from just browsing videos on YouTube. Don't remember exactly how I came upon it, but there's this video of James Smoke. He's just on his knees on the side of a Tennessee highway, surrounded by cops. He's worried about his dog, presumably getting out and getting into traffic. The doors are open. His dog, General Patton, hops out of the car, runs around looking for him, and one of the officers shoots the dog in the face with a shotgun. That was the first thing that I saw. And so I was upset about it. And I looked to find out if there were more of these incidents. And sadly, it opened my eyes to the whole thing. I saw more videos, heard more news stories. This was a couple years ago. And so then I approached the producer of the film, Patrick Reasonover, with what I had found and wondering if he thought that this was worth pursuing, and he felt the same way. So we started making the film.
And who is the filmmaker you're working with?
Patrick Reasonover, he's the producer.
So I was looking at the trailer for your piece, and I recognized one of the incidents that happened right here in the city of Austin, the story of Cisco the dog. And this actually happened here before I moved to the city to work for Alex. But it's a very popular story. You know, I go to a lot of the rallies around town. People still talk about it. Basically, an officer, he was giving the proper address, but it was the wrong residence, if that makes sense to our viewers. Somebody called into the police station. They said, hey, you need to go to this address. He went to the proper address, but it wasn't the place where the incident was occurring. Anyway, Cisco the dog runs out towards the officers, as most dogs would, wagging the tail, maybe even barking a little bit. The officer pulls out a pistol, shoots the dog dead. And then, you know, when the dog owner says, sir, you just shot my dog, the officer kind of shrugs his shoulders and walks off to show it's a very common thing that happens, and it's very unfortunate. But, you know, in a society now where we hear about police shootings every week, it's almost to a point where nobody pays attention unless it happens to a dog.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the whole conversation obviously is getting intense nationally about police use of force in general and stories about people. But yeah, I mean, the dogs, I think I asked a local journalist one time why we don't hear about more of these stories. And she basically told me, like, when you're working the beat as a local journalist, you need the cooperation of law enforcement. And so when a dog gets shot, they kind of have to run this calculus. Is it worth getting local law enforcement upset by us doing this story when it's a dog. You know, if it's a person, that's a different thing. But I think it was like, it was just interesting for me to hear that perspective and gain an understanding of like how it actually works at a local.
Well, I can assure you that's not an issue that we have. I've had to talk to, I haven't talked to APD about any dog shootings in my tenure here. I've talked to them about several other things, but like you said, a lot of the news agencies, they don't want to run afoul, you know, getting the big stories and the scoops and all this stuff and being invited to the police picnics and all this stuff. So, I mean, yeah, I understand exactly where you're coming from with that. And as far as your research, how long did it take you to research the film and put it all together?
We've been at it for over 2 years at this point. We initially just bootstrapped a few of the first stories. We covered Shy Calvo. His 2 black labs, Peyton and Chase, were shot in a raid in his home. He did nothing wrong. Cindy Bowling, who lost her dog Lily at a wrong address. We just started kind of just grabbing our cameras and just bootstrapped some of these shootings, and we did some of the stories. And then we kind of researched as we went. And people, as soon as it became known that we were making this film, we were getting sent a lot of stuff. People were letting us know every time they heard about another incident. And and so we just tried to make a mix of stories that were, some happened a while ago, but it gave us an opportunity to find out like what the full aftermath was. Was there a lawsuit? Was there resolution? Were there changes? And then, like in the case of Michael Paxton there in Austin, Cisco had been shot fairly recently at the time that we captured his story. It was still very raw for him, and it was tough for him to tell and emotional to record it and hear his story as he walked us through beat by beat what happened. So it's kind of like, it kind of became this organic mix, and we just traveled light and just kind of followed the stories where they took us.
Right, and I noticed you also have law enforcement officers in your piece. Not to give too much of the film away, but what was there a general sense that you got from the law enforcement officers? Was it a different take from each person?
I would say it was pretty much a general sense. They have their side, and we want their side presented in the film, and they make their case about, you know, how dangerous their work is, and in a lot of cases they're not properly supported currently. If the administration is not making a priority about dogs, training them for encounters, giving them the gear they need, supporting them and trying non-lethal means, then they don't have that on their side either. So they're left with really just kind of what training they can infer from other things. And that's how we end up with this lethal force solution being used so frequently now. But they, you know, I mean, you can agree or disagree with them, but we definitely made it a point that we wanted to talk to them, and we want to hear them make the best case for what their situation is, and we want the audience to make their own estimations on whether they think these shootings are justified, whether they believe law enforcement and the reasons for keeping the status quo as it is, or whether or not they want to see change.
Exactly. And I don't have any hard figures in front of me, but I would imagine that people like mail carriers or pizza men or other people who may encounter dogs on a semi-regular basis don't have near the fatality numbers that some of these officers do. They employ other means, you know, pepper spray, things such as that. Did that factor into the film at all?
Yeah. In fact, one of the activists that we talked to, he formerly was did deliveries for UPS, and he talked at length to us about his means of handling the dogs and what UPS expected from him as an employee, and he was able to handle it. That's part of why his name is Jeffrey Justice, and that's why he's become so active. It's part of the reason is he says, I face this all the time, and I dealt with it. And in fact, worldwide, we have not found a case of a law enforcement officer being killed by a dog in the line of duty. So that includes parts of the world where law enforcement doesn't carry lethal force, or at least not as efficient as a sidearm. And so it really just kind of reads as feeling very irrational, especially since so many of these incidents end with the justification that the officer was in fear for their life. And so it's just an odd juxtaposition, this level of fear of something that has never happened that we can find.
Right, and I believe you also have an officer in your trailer who echoed the same thing. He said there hasn't been an officer that he's aware of that has been, murdered in the line of duty by a dog. And I can understand, dogs can be distracting if you have a fleeing suspect or somebody who you think is a threat to you, trying to do something behind the scenes. But just the dog itself, like you said, has not killed anybody that we are aware of. So, Michael, tell us where people can find the film and, what we can look forward to when we actually see it.
You can find out more about the film at ofdogsandmen.net. Our trailer is up there. We have some stories, some more information about some of the stories we cover. And presently, we are just seeking to set up the distribution home for the film. And we still have a bit more work to do on it. We're finishing that up, so we don't exactly have a release date yet. We are just crossing our T's, dotting our I's, and trying to figure out where it's going to make its premiere so that people can check it out. So if people want to follow us on Facebook and check out our website or sign up for email updates on the site, then they'll be in the loop. We'll let everybody know as soon as we know where it's going to premiere.
Right. And as far as the film, do you expect it, or would you like to see it in theaters, or is it a home release, or what are you guys planning?
We're actually pretty agnostic about that. We're trying it. We're just trying to get it in front of whoever can actually get it to the people. And if they feel that the best route for that is theaters, then theaters works for us. If it's TV, if it's DVD, if it's video on demand, however that pans out, we just want to get it out there so people can see it, and hopefully it can affect some change.
All right, Michael Ozias, give us your final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Well, I'm hopeful that there can be progress, and I think that it can happen constructively. And I feel like I'm concerned because recently in the Commerce City, Colorado shooting, the officer faced charges of animal cruelty and they didn't stick. But my fear is that if things keep continuing the way they're going and we don't have constructive solutions, some officer somewhere is going to be the first one to go to prison for shooting somebody's dog. And I think we can fix this before that happens without more shootings and lawsuits and other ugliness. We can fix this. We're trying.
All right, Michael Ozias of dogsandmen.net. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thanks, Jakari.
Well, that's it for our show tonight.